But now we dive into some football. By the way, John, I don't know if you knew this. We just had Daniel Kaplan on the show, and this was pretty interesting regarding the AAF discussion that we've had for a lot of this week.
Yeah.
The $250 million investment was not exactly a $250 million investment.
Yeah, I said that, Mike. You're not listening.
No.
You knew that 4 days ago.
No, I'm saying he bought the league for an undisclosed amount of money. And this $250 million is basically what he's saying the league will need if they do X, Y, and Z. So essentially he's saying he wants them to expand. He wants more teams. And if they don't do that, they're never going to get this $250 million. So, yes, you had said that the $250 million was not what he didn't throw $250 million on a check and say, here you go.
Yeah, exactly.
But he did pay an undisclosed amount of money to purchase the league.
Yeah, and he got them through payroll. And I kind of said now it's at sort of the behest of one man how this league moves forward. And it's pretty much up to him. And it's his whim. If he wants more teams, he wants more teams.
Apparently he wants up to 32 teams.
Yeah. If he wants to wake up tomorrow, Mike, as you know, and maybe some Twitter troll got him up on the wrong side of the bed, he can say, you know what? I'm going to pull the plug on this league. It's his league. So he could basically do what he wants with it. And I think a lot of people don't recognize that and don't realize how precarious the future of this league is, mainly because I don't see a path forward where this league can generate any significant revenue.
Yes.
And I've been saying that from the start. So ultimately, I think that it's doomed to fail, unfortunately, because I like the product.
Yeah, no, which is what, we also –
for them to succeed.
We did bring that up about, their TV deal, which is not a deal per se. They kind of barter the time or broker the time or however they don't get paid by the networks to do it. So It is very difficult for them to figure out a way to make money. But he was saying that the ratings that they have should be attractive enough for these stations to want to keep them on.
Well, that's true. It's helpful. But again, it depends on what kind of deal you make down the road with TV providers, because ultimately you have to get to the point where they're paying you for the product instead of bartering that time and just letting you sell advertisement, which is what is going on with the AAF right now. And if you fast forward a year with the XFL, that's one of the reasons why Vince McMahon ultimately decided he could give this another go, because as I mentioned on the show earlier, he just got off signing a big money deal for World Wrestling Entertainment, and he thinks his league will be able to get television stations to pay for the product. Oliver Luck has said, he's the head of the XFL, has said they're going to announce a television deal very, very soon. And everybody will be looking at that and saying, what kind of deal is it? Are they getting paid to put the product on? If they are, if Vince is right, they have the inside track on success, even though the AAF has the head start and some decent television ratings. Because the key is to get those television stations to pay for the product.
Yeah, in the end, right. And he also said once the other league comes in, one of the two leagues the demise will be there, that you can't have two leagues going up against each other. And I think we all agree on that.
Yeah, I mean, two spring football leagues, and there's going to be more than that. There's a couple other even less minor leagues. So it's popping up all over the place. But
playing spring football like professionally?
Yeah, there's a Pacific League coming up, and there's two more leagues coming up that are trying to do it. And then you have the Spring League again, which I still think is trying to gear. But that was obviously only a few days. And ultimately, I think it's too much product. I think people are trying to piggyback on the popularity of the NFL. But people don't want more football. They want more NFL football. And as we know, fans are fans, and they love their teams. And there's a history with the Philadelphia Eagles. and everybody else. There's no history with the Orlando Apollos. There's no connection, even with cities that don't have NFL teams. So it's very difficult.
There's no question. And one of the things he's mentioned that you brought up a lot is that the television networks like football, NFL or other, because it is a product that people do seek out and watch.
Yeah, and they feel it's DVR proof, and people like to watch it live, and that's the key because they get their money by selling advertising and significant money from advertising. And it's really difficult for those advertisers to get the same kind of eyeballs they used to get to because there's so many technologically been so many technological advancements, and DVR is part of that, but also streaming. And people generally don't want to sit through commercials. So the problem everybody has is how do you get them to sit through commercials? How do you get them to get this advertising, even if it's on a subconscious level where they're sitting through it? And the only thing that's been guaranteed to kind of do that is live sports because people are engaged. They don't want to watch it later on DVR. They don't want to avoid people and not know who won. They want to watch it live, and they want to be involved live. And that's why, even though the ratings are down pretty much across the board for every sport, revenue keeps going up, because it's the last bastion for advertisers. It's the only thing that can guarantee those eyeballs to those advertisers.
John McMullen, at JF McMullen. You can follow him on Twitter for the NFL, the Eagles, the AAF conversation. Has been an interesting one, to say the least, through this bumpy road here. They'll have games again this weekend. But how about this news, John? Jason Witten is returning to the Cowboys. He will leave the Monday Night Football booth and head back for a 16th season to Dallas. Now, number one, were you stunned, shocked, surprised at all when this news came down earlier today?
Well, I was a little bit stunned that he's going back to play. I'm not stunned that ESPN's moving on. It just didn't work. Nobody liked it.
Their intention was to bring him back, though, to try it again.
Well, we don't know. I mean, it was pretty clear that the fan base didn't really accept the booth and what they tried to do. So, yeah, I mean, ultimately, I think they would have brought him back. I don't know if it would have been in the same high-profile position. From Jason's camp, people had thought he kind of knew it wasn't working as well, and he ultimately wants to get into coaching. And some people have speculated he's going to be the next head coach of the Dallas Cowboys. And that's why he wanted to get back into the game. But I thought it would be as a coach, as an assistant coach. The fact that he's playing is a little bit surprising, other than obviously the money. He can make upward of $5 million by signing this deal. Then I expect him to retire. Then I expect him to join the Cowboys coaching staff. And who knows with Jerry Jones, he could be on the fast track to be the head coach of that team rather quickly. So I just think he kind of knew. He figured out he wasn't a natural at it like Tony Romo is. It wasn't working. So I think both sides were looking for an out to save face, and they got it.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to kind of figure what kind of addition he's going to be to this offense and what it's going to mean to them, but this was a guy who was a Hall of Fame level tight end. But do we really anticipate a year off and putting him back in that offense, that does a lot to change the Cowboys offense?
No, I mean, remember when he last played, he was a declining player. He wasn't what he once was. He's still a very good receiver, still a competent blocker. It's rare in today's game where you have a guy who can do both. So he is sort of an old school dinosaur in that mode, a true Y-back, a true inline tight end. So he can help, but he's certainly not dangerous as far as, beating you down the seam, which some of these athletic tight ends can do and create headaches. He's not that player any longer. I expect the great hands are still going to be there. As I said, the ability to block is still going to be there. But he's an aging player, and he's limited at this stage.
Yeah, he will return to the Dallas Cowboys, and obviously, that was one area, that was one position where a lot of people thought that they needed an upgrade. I don't know that this is the upgrade that they were anticipating or that they were hoping to get, but Witten is back with the Dallas Cowboys, and Monday Night Football now. I don't know what they're going to do. I mean, there's an opening, I guess. John, are you interested?
Yeah, I'm interested if they want to give me a call. You know who I think they should go with, because I think he would have been great, and I mentioned this on Twitter a few minutes ago. And remember, he was set to go into the booth, and that's Jay Cutler. And then he came back to play for the Dolphins, and now he's kind of popular for the reality show with his wife.
Right.
People don't know because of what he was on the field, but he is really well-spoken, really funny guy. I think he would be tremendous at it. I really do. And I thought at the time, remember, Romo was taking over, and I said at the time, I think Cutler's going to be better than Romo. Now, that's an impossibility because I think Romo is the best I've ever seen. But if you're looking for somebody new, and clearly that's what they tried to do last year, I think he would be a great choice.
John, the official measurements on Kyler Murray today. Now, here's what I wanted to bring this up because I'm about 5'7", okay? Somewhere in that.
Can't play quarterback.
No, I'm too small to play quarterback. I'm about 5'7", but nobody would ever walk up to me and mistake me for 5'10", right? No one's saying, man, you're about 5'10". No, I'm 5'7", and it's obvious that I'm 5'7". How did anybody question that this kid was 5'10"? Like, I don't understand it. He ended up being 5'10" and an eighth. How did anybody even suggest, hey, this guy might be 5'7"?
Yeah, and people are still saying, there's no way he's 5'10". I mean,
how is that possible?
Hey, I used to watch Kevin Cobb, and I used to say to myself, he's 6'2", I think Kevin was. And when he was on the field, he just didn't look 6'2". I mean, I think that's what it comes down to. Some people, their presence is a little bit different. But, yeah, when people are looking at the combine where everything is done in front of people and they still question the measurements, I don't know. It's weird to me. I think the bigger issue is the changing of the guard in the NFL and Russell Wilson, players like that, Drew Brees, and the fact that people think this is a viable first-round pick despite his size. And some even speculate Arizona could take him number one overall and trade Josh Rosen.
Well, oddly, like to interject to say, does 5'10" make him in play for the number one overall pick now?
Well, I think it's one of those situations where typically, no, he would not be considered because of the unique situation. Cliff Kingsbury, their new coach, is on record saying he loves him as a player. He runs the type of offense or wants to run the type of offense he would have to be in. So I think a lot of it is just people speculating and saying that. But the vast majority of the teams, make no mistake, still in this era will look at him and say, there's no way. So if it wasn't Arizona, he wouldn't be in play for the number one overall pick. And then you talk about being a first-round pick, and he would be in play, but it has to be a specific team. Mm-hmm. The vast majority of teams are still not interested in having 5'10" quarterbacks. And you can yell about it, and plenty of people have, but history says easier, not to say it's a guarantee, because there's been a heck of a lot of tall quarterbacks who can't play.
Sure.
But common sense says it's easier to play the position if you're 6'4", 6'5". And, I for people to immediately get their back up about that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. It's just common sense. It's really difficult.
Elway's tried them all. He went from 6'6" down to Case Keenum, so he's gone up and down the gamut.
Well, and that's another thing, because for some reason people have taken aim at John, who's had a very difficult time replacing Peyton Manning, and they laugh at him and say he took Paxton Lynch and Brock Osweiler, and they're both 6'7". Now he's bringing in Joe Flacco, 6'6". But yeah, they forget about Case Keenum, they forget about Trevor Siemian. He's just trying to find somebody who can play quarterback. And there are other traits, whether you're short or tall, that determine your success. Look, it's easier to play the position if you're 6'3", 6'4", than 5'10". And anybody who tells you different is lying to themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously, the vision that you have as a taller quarterback helps you see the field a lot better. Yesterday we threw out a couple of places for Foles: Jacksonville, Miami, Washington, Cincinnati. These are the odds-on favorites to get a guy like Foles. Jacksonville. I'm going to start with Jacksonville real quick, and we touched on them a little bit. But do they have to get rid of Bortles to be able to get Foles on that roster?
No, but I think they'd like to. It's interesting because the teams that would most like Nick do have salary cap issues and do have to do something at the quarterback position. With Miami, it's potentially Ryan Tannehill. A lot of people were talking about Oakland as a dark horse before Mike Mayock said Derek Carr as a franchise quarterback. They would have had to do something. The New York Giants, remember, came out and said Eli's coming back tomorrow. That to me is a perfect situation for Nick Foles. I mean, that would be perfect.
Yeah.
It would be a disaster for the Eagles. But to be able to play with Saquon Barkley and Odell Beckham, that's where he has a chance to succeed. Now, and who knows, the Giants may trade OBJ, but all these teams have issues with quarterbacks they have on hand, but ultimately they all need to make a change. Jacksonville does, Miami does, the Giants do, whether they recognize it or not. I think the Raiders do, but they won't. So they all have issues at that particular position, and they would be the most obvious fits. Washington as well, which it would be easier for them. But I will say this, Mike, I don't think the market for Nick Foles is going to be nearly as deep as people think it is. I don't think he's getting nearly as much money as people think he is. I don't think he's going to get to the $20 million per year mark. It's going to be difficult. One of the reasons it is difficult is because the teams that need quarterbacks have these albatrosses and on their roster that they're trying to move on from.
Yeah, and then, I mean, some of the teams on this list, like Miami is number 2, best team to land, best chance to land them. Like, I don't see Miami as a fit. Aren't they essentially in tank mode?
Well, some people have said that. Some people have speculated that. I don't know if there's – we've talked about this a lot with the NBA versus NFL. I don't think there is full tank mode in the NFL. Certainly, I don't think Brian Flores is coming in as a new head coach and where he's coming from. He wants to embrace that. I do think they want to move on from Ryan Tannehill. And I do think if you get Nick Foles at $17, $18 million a year, it doesn't preclude you from tanking if you get off to, say, a really, really bad start. And going in a different direction and quickly surmising that Nick isn't going to be the answer. But then I point to Andrew Brandt because, the former Packers executive who works at Villanova now, and he talks about the coaches and the GMs talking at the Combine. And he joked, it's basically saying, I'm here to answer your questions, but I'm not going to give you any information. That's how everybody does it. So, and I've said this with you before, I find it kind of funny that people will look at, say, what Howie Roseman says and Doug Peterson says on the podium in Indianapolis, and they say, okay, that's true. You know what I mean? They're trying to portray a smoke screen. They're trying to create an atmosphere where you say something The Giants were the perfect example of that yesterday because everybody went nuts when Pat Shurmur went out there and said, Eli's going to be back. Eli's going to be the starting quarterback. And it didn't last an hour before Dave Gettleman went up there and said, well, a lot of things can happen. And that's what it is. Just because Pat Shurmur says in February, Eli Manning's going to be the quarterback, if the Giants find a way to get better at that position, they will. Yeah. And you're not under oath when you say these things.
Washington 9-1, Cincinnati's interesting 10-1, Tampa Bay 12-1. Washington, though, they obviously need a quarterback, so that one will be an interesting possible landing spot. Cincinnati, they could just get rid of Andy Dalton and just change their franchise around there. And Tampa Bay's got a new coach, so you never know.
Well, they're all perfect examples again because they've all given. And I put this in quotations, votes of confidence to their quarterback. In Washington, they said Colt McCoy is going to be the starter. Well, you really believe that if they can't get better? In Cincinnati, Zach Taylor, the new coach, says Andy Dalton's going to be the guy. Doesn't mean he's the guy. And even with Bruce Arians, Jameis Winston, if they feel there's a way they can get better via free agency or the draft, they will do it. All of those teams.
Should be, and by the way, the Giants were 14-1, Oakland 14-1, Arizona 25-1, Buffalo 25-1, and the Jets 25-1. Those teams I don't understand. Buffalo, the Jets, and Arizona, they all drafted quarterbacks last year. Arizona has a chance to draft a quarterback again. I don't know why they would even be in the running in the conversation for a guy like Foles, but the Raiders would be interesting.
Yeah, Mike, is a Philadelphia guy, Mike Mayock, and he likes Nick Foles, and he admits he likes Nick Foles. And he was one of the guys at the Combine who said he believes Derek Carr is a franchise quarterback. But, I don't think he really believes that, number one. B, we all know John Gruden's history and the fact that he gets quarterbacks and he falls in love with them, and then he falls out of love 10 minutes later when the next guy comes along. So they're always you got to keep an eyebrow up. And really at that position, anytime you have John Gruden with his history, he's never happy.
Right.
So they're always going to be looking at other quarterbacks. But the one team you mentioned is Buffalo. I can't imagine, even though by no stretch of the imagination am I sold on Josh Allen. But I can't believe they would be looking to pull the plug on him this early in the process.
Yeah, they won some games with him out there, right? I mean, he wasn't like an offer.
No, yeah, they won some games. He's really raw. And there's a lot of scouts in the NFL believe you can teach quarterbacks a lot of things, but the one thing you can't teach him is accuracy, and he's not very accurate. But the Bills are obviously not in that camp, or they wouldn't have drafted him in the first place. So they're not going to move on from Josh Allen.
No, I would be surprised if the Jets, the Bills, those teams, or even Arizona.
Well, the Jets, yeah. I mean, the Jets are very happy with their selection. They think Sam Darnold's going to be a superstar.
All right, plenty more on the NFL in the coming days. We got free agency about 15 days away now, less than 15 days away. Remember, February is over now, so we get into March, and then we get the free agent period starting.
March 11th,
legal
tampering, the oxymoron of legal tampering, and then March 13th, unrestricted free agency.
Unbelievable. Here we go. John McMullen, 97.3 ESPN.com, at JF McMullen. All right, man. We'll talk soon.
All right. Thanks, Mike.